ON1 NoNoise is out. This is July of 2021, and I want to do a video on my first impressions for this. Quite simply, just because I've gotten a lot of questions on it, so I can't ignore the amount of questions I've gotten on this. I had done a video a few months ago where I talked about some noise reduction that I use, and especially in light of that video, I had a lot of people ask me if I plan on sticking with Topaz denoise or am I going to switch to ON1 NoNoise. So here's how we'll break this video up. Part number one, I'm going to give you my first impressions of NoNoise. Just a quick walkthrough. There's not a lot of settings to walk through, so I'll give you some first impressions and some differences between Topaz denoise. Part number two, we'll take a look at some files where I actually compared, where I actually ran Topaz denoise and I ran ON1 NoNoise just on auto settings. I didn't make any changes. But we'll just go in there and just, kind of pixel people a little bit and take a look at some differences there. And part number three, I'll give you my recommendations. I'll tell you what I plan on doing going forward and then what I would suggest you do going forward based on the software you can use. Heck, I'll even put the time code right here and you can scroll forward to that if you don't care about any of the other stuff. Okay? All right. Part number one, let's just talk a little bit about first impressions. In order to get there, I got to talk a little bit about workflow. So both Topaz denoise and ON1 NoNoise have standalone and plugin versions. I'm not including DxO in this, and there are other apps out there as well. I've tried them all. I settled on Topaz denoise. I don't care for the workflow that DxO requires you to do, so I always use the plugins, okay? Because Lightroom is going to be the first touch point. To me, Lightroom is one of the best raw editors in the world. That is going to be the first touch point on my raw photos. I'm not going to save them out as DNGs, open them up into another program, save it out as another DNG, whatever, bring it into I'm not going to do that. It's a great raw editor, and that's where I'm going to do my organization and my raw edits right here. And then I'm always going to jump into my plugins through the photo edit in menu here rather than go with the standalone. And you can see that you can get to both of those plugins right from there. I am aware that both Topaz and ON1 suggest that you do your noise reduction on the raw file. All I can tell you is that in my workflow, especially with Topaz denoise, I have tried doing it on the raw photo again, and that really breaks my workflow inside of Lightroom, so I don't care to do it in the first place. But I have tried, and the results are not compellingly different enough for me to make an adjustment there. So that's why I have no problem using the plugins. But of course, your mileage can vary. You should always try it on your own photos. Now, if I decide I need Photoshop, and this is only going to be for wildlife, that's what I do my high ISO photography on, so I can't speak intelligently about other types of photography. But when it comes to my wildlife, I often have some distractions that I will jump over to Photoshop for, and it'll make a copy of the photo. It'll jump over into Photoshop, and this is where I can do all my distractions and add layers, and that's where I'm going to do my noise reduction. Again, I'm not going to do any noise reduction or sharpening to the photo in Lightroom or before this. I would just do all of that noise reduction here, and I can do it on layers. Now I've got Photoshop's layers and masking and brushes, the tools that Photoshop is really the best in the world at. Okay, and none of the other plugins, even though some of them have some of those tools in there, they're not as good as this. Which is what I've done here. So I made another copy and I went up here to the filter menu, and you can see your plugins will show up down there at the bottom. I already did that, which is why you see this window running and why that area was gray before. So let's jump over into NoNoise. From here, quick lay of the land, you got your zooming controls up here at the top. You've got some two masking adjustments on the left-hand side, a retouching adjustment. Again, I think Photoshop's better at all this, but if you don't have Photoshop, then you can try to get some of that work done inside of here. And then you've got your adjustments on the right-hand side. First big difference I see are no models. So there are no AI models like there are in Topaz denoise. So I'm results-based driven. I don't care if it's a model. I don't care if it's not a model. I'm just going to look at the results. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything good or bad to me. The next thing that you'll notice, crazy fast. As you move an adjustment, it instantly updates. Those of you that use Topaz denoise will know that that does not happen. That's going to be usually 4, 5, 6 seconds whenever you move an adjustment slider of any sort, or even panning around your photo and changing the view. Again, that's going to cause it to re-render, which takes a few seconds. That said, the flip side of this is I noticed ON1's startup and teardown, which is basically getting in and getting out, was a lot longer. All right. So you just have to weigh those. I think most people would rather wait a little bit in the beginning and end and have more of a seamless experience when using it. But again, flip side of that is once I'm in Topaz, I have a couple of settings that I know just work for all of my photos. A lot of time it is the auto settings. So it's not like I'm really spending a lot of time in there moving things around either. But ON1, when it comes to actually using it, super fast, almost instantaneous as you move anything inside of here. All right, as far as the adjustments go, not too many. Up in the noise reduction section, we'll keep sharpening out of it for now. Luminance, which is going to be the amount of noise, so 0 all the way up here to 100, and that's just going to remove the noise, which is also smoothing the photo. Okay. From there, we've got enhanced detail. That's going to bring back a little bit of detail around some of the edges and texture and whatnot in the photo. So got enhanced detail, and then you've got your color, which will remove noise inside of those color areas in the photo. You can hover over each one of them. They'll give you a short tooltip on what they do. And then ON1 has broken out sharpening. Topaz does this to a degree where they have a sharpening adjustment, not as many as this, but I believe, I could be wrong, I don't know the engineers, haven't talked to them. It feels like Topaz is doing sharpening even in its noise reduction. Even if I turned its sharpening all the way down to 0, the noise reduction still seems like it's doing some sharpening inside there, where ON1 has totally broken this out to its own set of settings that you can leave at 0 if you wanted to, or and go do your sharpening somewhere else, or try to get some of it done right here. Okay? All right. From here, so I'm in the plugin, so I just click done. It would return me to Photoshop. If it was a standalone, I would have to export it into a different file format, but let's go ahead and cancel out of there, because that pretty much gets us through looking at the ON1 NoNoise interface, and jump into part 2, which is let's compare some photos here. Let's take a look at ON1 versus Topaz versus the original. So here's one where if I were to share this photo, I would probably share it, if I were to share it on a website or Instagram or something, I would probably share it at about this level. I like, I'm cropped in on the action, but I'm not so cropped in on the action that you'll see that much noise. If I go one level deeper, maybe you see a little bit more of the noise inside of there, but I thought this was a good one to at least start with. I'll work on one where we would be required to crop in a lot more, where right now I'm just pixel peeping, so just because we can. But let's really zoom in here. So this is the original photo, and this is the ON1 noise reduction layer, purely auto settings, okay? Didn't change a thing. And then this is the Topaz layer. All right. Settings for this photo, ISO 5000, taken with my Sony A1, f4, and I believe 1/2000th of a second, okay? So again, if we were to take a look at this, this is the original photo. This is the ON1 version. This is the Topaz version. If I'm gonna talk about differences, I see the Topaz version a little bit more textured in some areas. ON1 tends to smooth it out a little bit, and that's not to say, and that's the reason why I didn't sit here and try to painstakingly go back and forth with all the sliders and adjustments, because it's the best analogy. It's like Coke and Pepsi. They're two different things. You can't expect them to taste the same. And there's two different programs here from two different companies. They work differently. And that's not to say you can't get Topaz if you like a smoother look. And a lot of people do. I like a little bit more texture. I like the noise to be mostly gone and a little bit of texture there. Whether that texture is artificial or not, I don't know. All I know is that my eye tends to gravitate toward it. It's not to say you can't get a smoother look with Topaz. It's not to say you can't get a more textured look with ON1. Again, these were just the auto settings here, and that's one of the differences that I notice in there. Is ON1 will tend to be do a really good job of getting rid of the noise. Tends to be a little bit smoother in some areas. All right, I am breaking in to my own video. In fact, I'm going to have to render out an entirely new YouTube video, so any previous comments and things will get wiped. But I felt like I had to do this to be fair. So I hadn't realized when I put the video up how poorly NoNoise was going to work on a non-RAW photo. And ON1 even tells you when you run it. You didn't see it show up because I didn't open it up on the video here. But they even tell you when you run it that it is not yet optimized for non-RAW photos and that they're working on that. So I thought, to be fair, I would add this into the video here. What I did is I opened up that same photo directly as a RAW photo into ON1 NoNoise. and then saved it as a DNG, then imported it into Lightroom, which it's not going to change my recommendations at the end of the video. I'm still, regardless of the results, I'm still not going to change my workflow to accommodate this. But the results are significantly different. So let's go in here. Here, we'll look at it at this zoom level here. So this is the original photo. Okay. This is the rendered TIFF that I ran through NoNoise at first, and then this is running it, saving it, opening it as a raw photo into NoNoise, saving it as a DNG, etc. That's that version. So they are significantly different from each other. You see, this is the rendered TIFF, and then this is the rendered raw file, significantly different from each other. And then when I show you the ON1 versus the Topaz version, that Coke Pepsi analogy really holds true. It's why I gave it, because they are so close to each other. So that's the Topaz version. That's the ON1 version. So the Topaz version and the ON1 version, so darn close to each other. One person's going to say they like it one way, another person's going to say they like it another way. It's just the way the world works in this stuff, but it further identifies the fact that they are so close to each other. And when you get to the recommendations at the end of the video, that should even make a little bit more sense. Now, let's switch over to another example. And this one I've already gone through and done all the versions the right way, so I don't have to break into the video yet again. But this is a Laughing Falcon. I actually just took this last week in Costa Rica. If I were to share the full body shot this way, we'd be fine. But a lot of times on Instagram, I like to really zoom in to a part of the bird that's beautiful, especially with a bird that's this beautiful. And I like to share just a closer photo of it. So in this case, that's where the noise becomes much more apparent when you're cropping in tight. So as we look here, you can see this is the plugin version. We're going to disregard this because it's just, ON1 is even honest with you when you open up the program that it's not working well on non-raw files. Okay. So this is the plugin version. And then what we have next is when I opened up the raw photo into NoNoise, exported it as a DNG, and then brought that into Lightroom. So that's that version. Night and day difference, right? And then if we compare that with the Topaz version, you can see that's Topaz and that is ON1. So again, I think everybody's going to see something a little bit different. I see the Topaz version as slightly sharper, but again, these are all using auto settings. I'm actually going to give this one to ON1 because I think the ON1 version did a little bit of a better job around the eye, but again, everybody's going to see something different. And if you're not zoomed in so far to the photo, you're probably never going to notice the difference. And even though I am zoomed in, to me, that Coke Pepsi analogy really fits here because they're both good. They're both essentially the same. And you just have to figure out which one fits better for you. So recommendations. Well, if you are an ON1 photo raw user, which is what I just switched over to here, you've got your organization, you've got your raw editing, your toning, your color, all this stuff. I think this is a no-brainer. I think once you learn how to use NoNoise and work with some of those detail and sharpening adjustments, if you're used to other noise reduction software, I think you'll actually be able to get yourself pretty darn close to what you're used to. And if you can, keep it in the family. It's still going to open up as a separate window July 2021 right now in its current form. But as a Photo Raw user, when Photo Raw gets its big update in the fall, it's going to get rolled into the details section in Photo Raw. So now you're not going to have another program to open. And you're going to have excellent noise reduction built right into Photo Raw. So that would be my recommendation if you're an ON1 Photo Raw user. If you're not, I am not. I'm a Lightroom user. All I can tell you is I am personally not going to change my workflow. Okay. At this point, I haven't seen a reason to. I'll never say never because every time I do, I'm wrong. But at this point, I've got a workflow that works really good for me. I was going to say 5 years ago I couldn't get these results. 3 years ago I couldn't get these results. My wildlife photography, I'm getting incredible results from this workflow with Topaz denoise and also Sharpen AI at times. So I don't feel the need to interrupt that and change that personally. Okay. But what I would say to you is at this point, if you're still on the fence, give it a try. Download the free trial, give it a try. You got to run your own photos with your own settings, your own style, and your own eye for what you expect from noise reduction software. Give the free trial a test run and see what you think about it. And at the end of the day, consider this, that once you find something you're happy with, there's a lot to be said with sticking with it and getting back to shooting and editing. I think editing is good too, but I don't want to be testing out software all the time and always wondering and switching if there's some new, better software out there. So I think there is something to be said for finding something and sticking with it. As I mentioned earlier, I did do a video where I kind of admitted that I was wrong about noise reduction. If you're curious to go watch that and see my journey as these things evolved over there, I think going to that video would be a great next step, and I think you'd enjoy the story as to see how my photography evolved over time and how some of the software that I use also changed.